Welcome back, men. This is Dragonfire, Menzochemical Path. I'm Daryl Kroll. This is episode 3, and what I'm going to be going into is ancestral trauma. So, with this topic, there are a few deeper aspects. There is obviously the intuitive side of things where some people just know that they're fucked up because their father was, or their grandfather was, or the stories they'd heard of their great grandfather, or if they'd met them, which I did. So basically, there's also the scientific side, which is something of a gene sequence where let's just go into it after. And basically, this is something that is genetic. It's in your genes. Epigenetics, if you're familiar with that, which can be the aspects of your genes which are switched, certain sequences are switched on or off, which make you either susceptible to stress, not susceptible to stress, a relaxed person, an anxious person, a depressed person. All of these things can be sequences that are switched on or off in your genes, in your genetics. So this is also something that can and is passed down through many generations. Some spiritual healers say up to 7. Geneticists say it can be indefinite, which is likely because there are studies done on certain animals that showed their offspring had the exact predisposition to a certain situation that there's no way they would know about it otherwise because they were never exposed to it. However, they would have the same exact reaction to their parents to a certain substance, yet parents had not been exposed to that, and these parents had, and then the offspring were then genetically altered, say, to feel the stress of that situation. So they would have a certain reaction to that situation. So if you're listening right now, it's probably because you've wanted to break the cycle, knowing that there are many men out there that are carrying wounds and traumas and things that they are aware of, but you just don't know where they came from because they probably never started in your life. There are certain aspects of our childhood, our developmental years, 0 to 7, or even in the womb. Again, spiritual beliefs say that from conception to birth is one stage of development. 0 to 7 is another stage. That's obviously the typical psychological belief. And then all within that, you can pick up certain stresses, traumas, factors that will have an impact on your life and your behavioral patterns. So what is ancestral trauma? Ancestral trauma. Let's get to that first. Ancestral trauma isn't just about growing up in a hard environment. Of course, that can have an impact and is absolutely part of it. It's not just about childhood wounds or father wounds. It's basically unprocessed trauma that gets passed down genetically, emotionally, and spiritually to children and offspring of their children and so on. So, for example, my grandfather was Polish. He was in Poland during the invasion from Germany. I think he was a partisan for the first 6 months or so. He was captured in May of 40. Anyway, he spent 5.5 years in a prison camp. Now, I can't even begin to imagine what that would be like. 5.5 years of stress, of not knowing if you're going to make it through that day because people are getting shot in the head next to you, and all of the sort of horrors, that lack of food, lack of hygiene, same clothes, cold, winter, it would be cold as fuck and you're not in jumpers and all that sort of stuff. I mean, that would have toughened you up. I think the fasting probably made him genetically, physically very strong and healthy because he lasted to 94. But emotionally, that was not good because I know that he had a drinking problem when I was younger. I was the first in my family. My mother was only 18 when she gave birth to me. So I got to know my grandparents quite well. They were quite young. So I spent a lot of time with them. I lived with them. And I saw different things, different characteristics, stresses, anger issues, drinking, masking emotions, etc. Now, my grandmother also was taken by Nazis. She was made to be the maid of a house So there was a lot there. My mother, who, bless her heart, had also anger issues, high anxiety, crazy outbursts, and things like that, which was all projected at me as a child and didn't make for a fun childhood. And also triggered, I think, my own responses within that because I 100% got them. I had anger issues, I had anxiety, I had depression, I had all of it. It wasn't fun. But this can be changed. So it's not something that you're fucked with. Now, how does this happen? Epigenetics is basically the environment you live in. So you can also look at things like your diet, if you are physically active, if you sleep well, if you have a high stress job. All of this has a factor on your genes. That means basically DNA methylation, which is like a dimmer switch or a switch for your genes. Methylation is a biochemical process where a methyl group, which is basically a carbon atom bonded to hydrogen atoms, is added to DNA, usually at a specific location called the GPC site. So what happens is this attaches it to the base of the DNA and it either tightens or loosens on the DNA. So you know what a DNA strand is. And when it tightens, it switches the gene off. And when it loosens, it switches the gene on. So if you've got a predisposition to be, let's say, high strung, so your emotional regulation switch is off. That's basically how it works. So I'm not going to go too deep into it. There are plenty of videos out there that will explain this in great detail. I'm not a scientist. I just read and watch. There are YouTube ones, some great podcasts as well on that. But that's the basis of it. So why does this matter in trauma? Trauma and chronic stress alter the body's methylation patterns, particularly around genes that regulate cortisol, oxytocin, serotonin, etc. So cortisol sensitivity, too much methylation equals an overreaction to stress and longer recovery time from the 4Fs: flight, fight, fear, fuck, fawn. Oxytocin bonding, methylation can impact trust, emotional connection, and attachment. So if that's off, then you're quite detached, don't really bond to your partner, trust issues, all that sort of thing. Serotonin, good mood regulation. So having healthy serotonin means you don't get depressed. Having that gene off means you get depressed and risk emotional escalation, etc. So how does this get passed on? This can be carried basically through the sperm, which means children can be born with methylation markers that influence their gene expression. So around stress, fear, inflammation, and bonding, these are the particular ones. There are studies that have been done. There was a mouse study that was done. Basically what happened is the scientists had a group of mice. They had them in their cage. They would present them with cherry blossom. So the mouse would come and sniff it or eat it. And then they would get an electric shock every time that they'd come near it. So then they learned over time that going to sniff the cherry blossom was bad. Now, passed on to the next generation was born, never had been in the environment, never received an electric shock. Yet, when presented with cherry blossom or cherry blossom put in their cage, they would run away because they knew that it meant something like an electric shock, which was bad. And so how it works is basically a histone is like a spool. The DNA is the thread wrapped around them, and the DNA wrapping tightly, again, is the gene is inaccessible, and the body can't read that expression of the gene. So that trait or ability to regulate is switched off. So again, if the genes are switched on, then you have emotional regulation. If the genes switched off, then you don't. And what happens in trauma is, especially if it happens early in life, you can change the histone acetylation and methylation, particularly around fear, memory genes, inflammatory pathways, stress response regulators, which all become reasons that people have problems in life. Now, this can make for certain fear and inflammation genes overreactive, which shut down pathways for emotional regulation, repair, and bonding. Is it inherited? Yes. So This is inherited. Studies show that histone modification patterns, especially in early embryos, are influenced by the parent's environment, stress levels, and trauma history. And this can affect the development of the child in utero. So, me, for an example, had all of these genes switched on for so emotional regulation off, high stress, high cortisol levels, probably bonding as well. And my mother was 17 years old, got dumped by my father, her boyfriend, for however many years before she gave birth to me. So not looking too good, which obviously led me to become, wasn't a problem child. I was a good child, but I had a really rebellious streak. And I think if I didn't have all that shit, I would have had a very different life. But here we are. I've gone through a lot of healing. I have a great marriage now, doing well in life, and here to help men. So I chose it. I believe that. Anyway, so these are all reversible. Trauma integration, breathwork, somatic healing, plant medicine, just basically safeguarding your nervous system is massive. Making sure you get enough sleep, making sure you get enough diet, not going overboard with alcohol and drugs and sex and video games and all of that, which is easy to do. I've done it, and it's the mask. Sorry, it's the band-aid. It's not the mask. So there's a lot of issues that come from emotional trauma, and not necessarily even been things like people survived the Holocaust or through wars or prisoner in war camp. Even a POW for 4 years held by the Germans or the Japanese would have fucked up someone. And continuing with the Holocaust survivors, so there was Dr. Rachel Yehuda found children of Holocaust survivors had altered stress hormones and methylation in genes tied to cortisol regulation. So you're basically living in fight or flight. So until you switch that off, you're fucked, because that just taxes you something silly. The Dutch famine study, families affected by starvation during World War II passed on gene expressions related to obesity, anxiety, and metabolic disorders. So the trauma of not having enough food also was passed down for generations. This, in Ireland, my dad's side is Irish, and the Great Famine in Ireland in the 1850s, 60s was also something that would have done that. Trauma, they say that 10% of a country that loses 10% of its population to a war or a genocide or whatever it is suffers severe psychological trauma. You've got to look at things like, why do I act certain ways? How can I change this? Why do I explode or feel shut down? You just got to be really critical. Like I remember once being at an ex's house many years ago and watching how she washed the dishes. And she washed it exactly the way her mother does. And I noticed that something I didn't do was wash dishes the way that my mother does. So that was just me. But then so many people just do what they pick up from their parents. And these are just passed down so easily. So until you change it, until you physically look at it or mentally look at it, mentally take note of it and be like, oh, I do this, I would prefer to do that. And it's easy to do. So, how does this show up in men? In many ways. Emotional shutdown. You can't cry, you can't feel your heart, you can't connect with your heart. Especially men that had fathers that were in wars and things like that. Quite easy to be shown. Have a teaspoon of cement and harden the fuck up. Which is, I think it has its place, 100%. Men need to be capable of that. Yet in today's age, to have a good relationship, you need to be in your heart. We need to be in our heart, especially in my line of work now with my wife, the spiritual work that I'm doing, helping men to basically heal their traumas and wounds and all that shit. You've got to be in your heart. And that's a big one for many men. Suppressing tears, not crying. I still find it hard to cry at times. There are times that it's very satisfying. I can't remember the last time I did, but I know that is the case. So these are things that your grandfather may have learned, then passed on to your father or passed on to you directly. Just suppressing tears, anger, outbursts, difficulty staying calm, being highly strung all the time, especially in fight or flight, that puts you right at the edge, or does for me anyway. I think for many men, puts you right at the edge. If someone does something and you're ready to fucking kill them, you know, appropriate in some situations, but probably not in day-to-day life, and definitely not with your partner or children and business. No, unless you're an MMA fighter. So basically trying to stay calm until something explodes in you is one big thing. The fight or flight response, again, which I said, this is something where if you're just unregulated, you're in consistently. And I was for many years working on building sites after the army. I think in the army it was probably the best for me because I actually was allowed to be violent. But it's not something everyone needs. Isolation, avoidance, going within, not reaching out to people, not telling your mates, I'll suffer alone, oh, don't worry about it, I'm okay. And this is that kind of stoicism where it basically turns into a personal prison. And that's not going to help anyone, especially you. Addictions and compulsions, so drugs, alcohol, as I said, sex, workaholic, perfectionism, porn, video games, chasing validation, always trying to escape the feeling of carrying that, whatever it is that's chasing you. Why, in my opinion, healing is a sacred duty? It is because for ourselves, firstly, that we can lead a proper, healthy, balanced life and have a partner, a loving wife, children, and not pass this shit on to our children because it's stopping with me. Don't care. I know there's still things, I'm not perfect by any means, but I'm going to give it a fair crack. And that's something that I've been doing for many years now. Plant medicines, traditional psychotherapy, all of it. So if you're the first in your line to be aware of and do this work, then in a sense it makes you an outsider to the dysfunction, because it is a dysfunction. It's not normal. It's not something that needs to happen. This is trauma. It's happened from not just wars, depression, hard economical times, people that fight all the time, bad relationships. This is all stuff that's passed down. And you can come up with any scenario that is highly stressful on a person, and that can be like a form of PTSD, just a stress response. Now, this is soul work, in my opinion. If you want to do it, I suggest you do, really getting into it, looking within yourself. Start with, if you want to journal or go speak to someone, even speaking to mates and sitting there, someone that's on the same wavelength and can help you nut these things out and talk about them, with even plant medicine. That's drugs, even weed, smoking pot or marijuana, Santa Maria, whatever you want to call it. Even sitting there having a joint, sometimes I find that very helpful. I ground, go out, and I just go inwards and I figure shit out. I don't do it every day, every now and then, but doing that can really help you become aware of what's bothering you. And then when you're aware of what's bothering you, you can work on it. So you can sit there and be like, all right, why am I pissed off? Because you trace it back to the step. This person said this at work. How did I start to feel after that? I started to get a bit edgy. Then it was okay, but then this person did this at work. It increased my edginess a bit more, and then a bit more. Someone else did something, then something else happened. And then by the end of the day, you're pissed off, and then you're like, fuck, why am I pissed off? So you got to go all the way back, process all of the shit. This guy was a dickhead because he did X, Y, Z. Or this person, or road rage, someone cuts you off, whatever it may be. Trace it back, find out what it was. Why did it bother you? Did it go against your values? Did they insult you? Did they disrespect you? Was he just being a dick? These are all the sort of things that really help to create balance in your nervous system. And it is, I say it's warriors' work, and it is because men are traditional warriors. And it requires courage, it requires stillness, presence. It's work under pressure. And you're not healing for yourself alone. It is for your sons, their sons, daughters, whatever, your mates, your wife, your girlfriend. And all of this can be a ripple in time, so to speak. Science shows that healing affects your children's biology, especially. Spiritually, when you transmute a pattern, you can shift a timeline. So you're in a different vibration. So instead of going to work angry every day, I hate this fucking job, I hate this car, whatever. No, all is well. Then different things come to you. It's a whole process. So what's encoded can be written. What is inherited can be healed, but not by thinking. It's by doing. Now, you can feel what your ancestors didn't. Trauma is energy. It needs to move, it needs to be released. If you're feeling some kind of shit, rage, grief, feel it. So I'm going to help you go through a process now. I'll take you on a bit of a journey, how to deal with it. And then you can look into my work. Feel free to do that. So you go into it, you feel it. If it's rage, you really rage, you feel it. Don't break shit and scream at people. Go off by yourself and do it. Punch the wall, punch a punching bag, whatever. Really feel it. Feel it in your body, and in your body, notice where it is. All right? Then you've got to sit with it. So you breathe deep. Do some breath work. If you know how to do breath work, you just like Wim Hof breathing, or just deep, what I call box breathing. I just in for a count of 5, say, and then you hold it, release it slowly. Sorry, hold it for 5, release it for 5, then hold an empty lung for 5, and then breathe in again for 5. And you just keep doing that. And you keep doing that for 2 or 3 minutes. Then you let that come in, that calmness come through your body. Then you think about what it is pissed you off. And then you look at it logically. So you look at it logically, or write it down, journal it, make a voice note into your phone, and then you speak it out. Speak it out. This pissed me off because of, or you write it, this pissed me off because of, or I felt ashamed because of XYZ, I did this. I had an outburst, I fucking broke something, I threw something, I feel ashamed because I lost control. I didn't feel in control. I'm a man, I need to be calm, I need to be collected. My wife is counting on me to be protective of her, not to scare the fucking shit out of her, all that sort of thing. Then you can write it down. What I do sometimes, I write it down, I go out, I start the fire, I go to the fire pit, I connect with the element of fire, which is, in shamanic terms, it's the oldest element. It's the element that created Earth. And connect to the fire. You just feel the fire. Acknowledge the fire. Thank you, fire, for being here. Thank you for creating. Thank you for destroying, whatever. And then you take your paper with your notes, you burn it, and you release it. Then you can write in place of that. Instead of smashing the glass, I will calmly count to 10, or leave the room, go outside, take my shoes off, put my feet on the ground for 10 minutes, then come back and deal with the situation. It's really difficult to go into random situations, but this is all stuff you can do. Other things, I would suggest joining a men's circle. Men's groups are great. The first time I went to go, I probably avoided it 2 or 3 times, and then finally went and realized that there are many men in the same situation or similar, very similar situations, having very similar problems, emotions, thoughts. It's just a great way to speak to men, because traditionally that's what the indigenous did, even white indigenous people, when we were tribal. we used to have circles. We used to sit, the elders would teach the young ones, they would be asked to pass knowledge or tell stories, whatever it is. It's men, when men sit together, and for women too, when men sit together, it's like there's a magic that happens. You just share, you tell stories, and then you just feel better. I don't know how to explain it better than that. So, anyway, I think that will do for today. And please join me again. Thank you.